First, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. Thankfully, even as the weather is turning, it hasn't gotten super cold yet. But we do appreciate everyone coming out. I'm joined today. I'm Mayor Spiller, former 3rd Ward Councilman, now Montclair Mayor, and we're here tonight just to talk about Lackawanna Plaza, a project that has been here in town, a site that we've all been focused on for quite a many years. And we'll talk in a minute about that for a little bit. I'm joined, I've got Councilman at Large Peter Jacobellis, who's here, and 3rd Ward Councilor Lori Price Abrams, who's here as well. As you may know or may have seen, we are out trying to have community conversations around this project as much as possible. Councilman David Cummings has had a couple as well to do exactly this, to have conversations, to solicit feedback, and then, of course, to move from there. So we do appreciate everyone coming out. I know, as I know my council colleagues do, certainly everybody is tremendously busy, whether that's work or trying to get home to families, young families, older families. But to take your time out of your schedules to be here is really important. I think that's certainly one of the big things that makes Montclair so special is really the engagement that we have. So we all, on behalf of both of them, I want to thank you for being here. What we're planning on doing tonight is, first and foremost, if you haven't already, there's some refreshments, some coffee to warm up, and some food in the back, and feel free. Secondly, as we go through this, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to give a quick introduction as well. After that, I certainly also want to introduce, I know he's here, David Plasek, who is the current owner and potential developer of this site. David, you want to give a quick wave, and certainly I'll introduce you as well. But he's here, and certainly it's helpful to have some of the questions, I'm sure, that come at the end. He can help assist. But we have our township planner, Janice Talley, who will really be running a lot of the presentation. Ira SMITH, who also works with us at the township level. Both of them will be walking through the presentation, talk about the redevelopment plan, talk about a little bit of history of the site, talk about where we've been, some of the things that have happened along the way, and of course where we are now and what we're looking to do moving forward. So we'll kind of engage in their presentation. After that, open it up to any questions that you have, and they will do their best, we all will, to try and answer any questions that you may have. If there's anything that we don't get you that you wanted to ask, you can always reach out to any one of us, or including Janice at the township, and of course we will all address those questions as we see them. So that's the plan for tonight. We will end at 9 o'clock. I always said when I did my 3rd Ward meetings, like, we start and then we're going to end exactly then. I'm mindful of everyone's time, and I got 2 little ones at home I want to try and get home to and maybe catch. So we'll honor that, and then of course there's always time to continue conversations as we go. So again, just want to thank everybody for being here. I really appreciate that. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Dr. Pons, Robert Kelly, who's here, for thank you so much for helping us with this space. So we appreciate that. All of the crew who's helped set up the technology, and the custodial staff, others who really set this forward in the Board of Ed. I know Eric's here as well. So I want to thank all of them for helping us use this space and have these conversations as a community. So thank you to you guys. With that, I'll turn it over to Councilman Peter Jacobellis. Peter.
Thanks, Mayor. There's a few seats up here, too, if anybody needs. So first, did you all get your 10,000 steps trying to find your way to this room? Just check your watch. No, but echoing the mayor, thank you for being here, taking time out of your week. This is the 3rd event that I've been to. I've been to both Councilor Cummings events because it's important to me to hear what everybody has to say, and in particular the questions that are being asked. I've been, close, along with the mayor and our other colleague, Councilor Schlager. We sit on the Economic Development Committee, so we've been a little bit closer to the details. So now kind of stepping out of the bubble and having these sessions is really, really important to hear the honest concerns and questions that people in the community have. This is just the very, very beginning. What we're talking about doing is just advancing this to the next step for planning board review and then going to a site plan development. Many, many, many steps between now and a shovel going in the ground. And I am anxious and eager to get the process started, but I do want that to be an informed process, and nights like tonight really help. And I just want to also say, and you'll probably hear this theme from a couple of folks tonight, I live a block and a half from Lackawanna Plaza on Grove Street. So when we talk about getting in and out of a driveway and traffic and circulation and busyness and all of that, it acutely affects me personally, and I have a fiance who I have to answer to as well for the decisions that I make. So I just want you remember that I'm not a member of Congress with 400,000 constituents that lives in some obscure place. I live here. I have to live with the impacts of the decisions that I make. So I just want you to have that background as well. So again, thanks for being here, and I'll turn it over to Councilwoman Price Abrams.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. I'll say another welcome to the 3rd Ward, and we know that this project really, while in the 4th Ward, very much sits on the on the line of the third ward, and that there's great impact certainly in many parts of town, but right where we all are as well. And this is an exciting moment. It's an inflection point as this process has been long underway, and we're now at this point of opportunity for, again, sustained kind of input and community engagement. Appreciate, again, as everyone else, that you are here tonight to ask your questions and hear, I think, an informative presentation that, each time we meet, there's something new perhaps to share, and there are some features that we're looking forward to having rolled out for you. We're here to study, to ask questions, and review and improve what is already a very well-developed plan. But really what we're all about is improving quality of life in so many ways through this project. That we're talking about the supermarket that will be part of a plan. We're talking about the creation of affordable and other low-income housing, and the open space that's part of a plan. These are all elements that are going to be hugely impactful and transformational in so many ways in town and how we live and relate with one another in this community. So I think it really takes that corner and awakens it to a higher purpose that we're really looking forward to seeing come to fruition. And we're not there yet, but we are in process. So very glad again that you're here tonight and that you have the opportunity to hear, but to ask your questions and be heard as well. And if you don't have the opportunity, or anybody who's listening to this after the fact, it will be posted for all to hear, that we hope you'll reach out with those questions and we'll certainly get answers. So with that, I'll hand it back to the mayor. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Lori. So with that, I'll ask Janice maybe to come up and kick us off. And again, as we look at this project, I think Councilwoman Price Abrams really touched on a lot of pieces. This is a project, as we all know, that started when Pathmark went out of business a number of years back. I can't remember how many people would then come up and say, you need to put a supermarket there, and we say we don't own that site, But I think it's been a push for forever. As you note, right, I live right in South Willow, and that's so close, and that's where it always goes. So this is a key location that we want to see something really great in. But this, as we've seen, iterations and iterations, is a place where now we hope we've got a plan, and then of course a development that gets us to what we need. So with that, our township planner, Janice Talley. Janice.
And my section of the presentation will be nothing new. My section. Okay. Okay. By the way, anything that's presented tonight, I will be posting on the website tomorrow. So if you can't see it here clearly, we will have it on the township webpage. Anyway, so my section of the presentation, you have heard before. Those of you who are at one of the other two meetings, I'm going to set the stage. For those of you who have not been part of this process, which started in 2015, it's been basically 7 or 8 years that we've been working on this. This is not the beginning. Hopefully this is the final stage. And I say stage because it is a public process. This is the township's plan. And the reason we're having these meetings, even though the plan hasn't even been introduced by the council yet, is to get feedback. Okay, it is your plan. It is the township's plan. We will provide images, massing studies, images, not exactly a concept plan, but details and graphics that will show what this would look like at build-out. That'll be the end of the presentation. We have Ira SMITH here who will walk through that and do it in a much better way with a much better understanding of the architectural details than me. For those of you, this is redevelopment. And I apologize if you've heard this before because you were at one of the other two meetings, but redevelopment is really a combination of planning, the master plan, which is what the planning board does and adopts. So it's a combination of the master plan and the zoning, which is the implementation of the planning policy. So you have all of those issues, all of those items in one document. So what I'm going to go through is, besides the background, which we've talked about, we started in 2015 when we did the redevelopment study and did our first round of the redevelopment plan, went all the way through council preparation, review by the planning board, comments from the planning board back to the council, and then it was not adopted for various reasons. The property owner decided to proceed with developing the property under the existing zoning for the property. And he did eventually get site plan approval. However, the property was sold. We have a new owner, and the present owner, which is David Placek and BDP Holdings, wants to develop this property using redevelopment. And redevelopment we've used it, as you can see, up and down Bloomfield Avenue on many properties. The master plan calls for, recommends using redevelopment in strategic nodes, important locations where design is important, where there's an opportunity to get greater public benefits from a redevelopment plan that closely determines and details what the site is going to look like. So the current property owner said, yes, I really would like to use the redevelopment process. I would like to come up with a plan that dictates how the property could be developed. It gives him, again, he's going to request enter into a redevelopment agreement with the township. There's certain anticipated tax payments. The revenue stream would be predetermined. The approach is that it equates what would be collected through taxes, but that consistent anticipated payments does help when developers are developing property, as opposed to normal taxes, which are not quite so, might be a little bit more inconsistent. There's a value in the consistent payments that are reflected in the redevelopment agreement. So that's why we came to this approach. The redevelopment plan, I'm not going to talk about the site. I think you all know the site. It's 8 acres. It's the largest underdeveloped property in Montclair. It's in the center of the municipality. It's in the center of our Bloomfield Avenue business district. It's also included in our it's in a historic district and contains some very important historic assets, which have been part of a lot of our conversations in the past. The plan includes a vision statement. I'm not going to read it verbatim for you tonight, but this is all plans, good plans have a vision statement which explains what the plan is trying to achieve. Again, you can read the plan on the site, or you can read it here. But essentially, we want to get a mix of uses that integrates this property into the texture of the surrounding community while maintaining the historic character of the original Lackawanna terminal building. So we have a series of overall goals. All plans have goals and objectives so that you can measure whether or not you're achieving them with the project. We want to make this area less of a barrier. I mean, right now, a lot of this property is a parking field, which is inconsistent with the feel and the fabric of downtown Montclair. So we want a property that's not just a parking field, but it integrates smoothly into the context of the community. We want to provide a supermarket to serve the community, create a vibrant place with a mix of uses. I think we've seen that when you have multiple uses on a property and not a single use, you get a lot of energy and bring a lot more vitality to the area. Promote redevelopment opportunities that create a positive fiscal impact. Provide a regulatory framework that will fulfill the vision. You'll see later on what that framework is in this plan. Preserve and enhance historic aspects of the plan area, which are identified in the plan, and coordinate the redevelopment to minimize disturbance to the surrounding communities. We have land use goals, and I'm not going to go through each one of these. They're on our website, they're in the plan, but again, it's to ensure that we get a supermarket. That's a requirement in the redevelopment plan. Ensure that you have a land use mix that creates a sustainable fiscal impact. Provide stores and services that serve the community. Provide plazas and public gathering spaces at key locations. That's the public benefit. These are public spaces, not private open spaces that would be provided. Provide mixed multi-generational housing opportunities. Affordable housing, including workforce housing. Incorporate historic elements into the project. Encourage shared parking. And create programmable open spaces that provide for year-round events. Again, because it's a redevelopment plan, we go into a lot more detail with design requirements, and we have design objectives. Require high-quality design and building materials. Provide visual breaks and pedestrian connections. provide bulk and setback regulations that allow reasonable development, but reduce the building mass and minimize visual impact, promote high-quality architectural design, etc. Create an attractive, pedestrian-oriented atmosphere, preserve and adaptively reuse historic features. There's a whole host of these, and when you go through the plan, you'll see how the specific design standards and requirements in the plan achieve these. We have mobility and circulation objectives. We want to provide safe means for all modes of transportation, be it automobiles, bicycles, e-vehicles, skateboards, wheelchairs, etc., and pedestrians. Provide multiple pedestrian connections to and through the area, improve connections to the train stations, activate Grove Street, make it less of a barrier, minimize traffic impacts, provide a two-way cycle track, bike lane along Glenridge Avenue, and maintain public access to the pedestrian tunnel. And we also have environmental sustainability objectives. Again, to reduce stormwater as much as possible, reduce the volume and speed of stormwater through green design, encourage the use of green buildings to reduce their impact on the environment. And finally, let me go through the plan. This is a different type of plan than you would see in a normal, per a normal zoning ordinance. It's a little bit similar to what we did for Seymour Street, where we came up with specific requirements for specific buildings and parcels depending upon the way they are located on the property. It's really akin to what's called form-based code. And this, what we have in the plan, is a regulating plan. The plan involves 5 separate buildings. And those buildings range between 5 and 6 buildings in height. They're identified on this regulating plan as buildings A, B, C, D, and E. We also have boards over on the side, which you can look at afterwards if you want to get a close-up of them. So there's 5 buildings, a maximum of 375 dwelling units on the entire 8 acres, a minimum of 135,000 square feet of non-residential space, because we want to maintain the mix of uses here to keep this as an activated area. It includes at least 75,000 square feet of office space and over 72,000 square feet of public open space. Again, the mix of uses, there is a required mix of uses in the redevelopment plan between residential, office, and retail because it's based on shared parking. And with shared parking, there's different uses that have parking requirements at different times, so those parking spaces can be shared. For instance, a space that's used for an office during the day could be used for a residential use in the evening or a retail use in the evening. Not 100%, there's percentages involved in the redevelopment plan, but there is some sharing of those parking spaces, and that way you reduce the amount of overall impervious surface you need in the property by sharing parking spaces. And finally, we have the plan. We show it graphically, and we show it in table format. And I'm not going to go through the table format tonight. It's in there. But what you see here on this plan are the height for the different buildings, the setbacks, and the stepbacks. And there's different requirements for each plan. So building A, for instance, has a maximum height of, has a setback of, let me read this, of 30 feet from Lackawanna Plaza. So what we do is for each building, we have a setback requirement from the adjacent street, and that's the distance between the property line adjacent to that street and where the building's located. So there's a different setback for each side. And then, as you go up each story, there's different setbacks, and that means you have to push the bulk of the building back from its facade as you go up. And it changes depending upon the street and the side of the building. So this plan graphically shows the setbacks and the stepbacks. We also show it in table form in the plan. Now the green areas are the public open spaces that are identified in the plan. We have a main plaza that's located at the corner of Lackawanna Plaza and Bloomfield Avenue. It's connected to Station Plaza, which is adjacent to the pedestrian underpass, and that fronts on Grove Street and is basically surrounded by buildings A, B, and C. You go through the pedestrian underpass, and that takes you to what's the Linear Arts Plaza, which is in front of Building D, between Building D and Grove Street. I think we'll have additional information and graphics showing what this would actually look like. But this is really how it's regulated. Ira will go into what this actually looks like. So I will end because it's important to remember that there are benefits to this. What are the community benefits? 74 affordable units plus 37 workforce housing units. I didn't mention the workforce housing units before. We have a 40,000 square foot supermarket, preservation of historic resources, including approximately 60% of the original steel stanchions that supported the canopies that were on the walkways adjacent to the train lines. We have 72,000 square feet of open space in 3 public plazas. We preserve the tunnel under Grove Street, and we have the construction of the two-way cycle track, which involves actually widening Glen Ridge Avenue at that point to provide the two-way cycles track in the street. So I'd like to hand it over to Ira, who'll go through the pictures. Yeah, there we go.
Beautiful. So, there's a world of difference between a diagram and the real experience of a place. And in architecture, we call that the experiential quality of a place. So if I say experiential, I'm differentiating between the kinds of drawings you've been seeing and what I'm hoping to share with you tonight. Because after all, even though I do have some really helpful imagery to show, it is ultimately 2D. These are 3D drawings on a 2D screen. We can't be there until it's built. I'm also going to set my timer. Give myself a 30-minute mark. Microphone not working. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, no, I haven't even begun to introduce myself. So, my name is Ira SMITH, and I'm a principal at Smith Marin Architecture and Interiors. I first want to thank Mayor Spiller, Councilors Yacobelis, Councilor Lori Price-Abrams for organizing tonight's event. I don't see him here, but I wanted also to thank Councilor Cummings for the public, is he here this evening? No, for the public meetings he's held, which raised a lot of important issues and concerns. It's helped me sharpen the points I'd like to make in the presentation tonight. And I want to recognize Councilor Baskerville, who was here in a prior iteration of Lackawanna Plaza, which is really relevant to tonight's discussion about where are we really at in this process. I also want to thank Janice Talley and Keenan Hughes. He is the planning consultant who works with Janice and I on putting the actual words and imagery together that form the redevelopment plan under the direction of the Township Council. And I want to thank all of you attendees, not just for coming out tonight, but for all the prior work many of you have done. I recognize a lot of faces here tonight and appreciate the input you've had all along, and we really do want to continue to hear your feedback based on where the project and proposed design is headed. I'm a big believer in context, and so in clarity, not just in terms of architecture, but with process. I thought it would be helpful for those of you who don't know why, who am I? I'm not an elected official. Our firm was founded 25 years ago by myself and my business partner, Eric Marin, and our office is on South Fullerton. Better? We've got more people. Hey, so for about half those 25 years, I was very involved with the Historic Preservation Commission in town, and at the same time, my business partner was instrumental in helping create the Town Center Business Improvement District. With our office on South Fullerton and me living until last year on the Crescent, literally around the corner, we had a lot of opportunity to come to understand the town center, its needs, its strengths, its shortcomings. And some of you may recall, as a result of the construction of the Valley and Bloom project and a high degree of dissatisfaction with how it looked and felt, the township decided for the next redevelopment planning process, it would hire a redevelopment design consultant. And we were fortunate, my firm Smith Marin was fortunate enough to be hired to do that work, with the first fruits of our labor being Seymour Street. So earlier this year, the township returned to us, and I'm grateful for that, to bring all the lessons learned from Seymour Street and carry them into the Lackawanna redevelopment project. I think that you'll find that there's good news and that a lot of lessons have been learned, and we've had a running start, which can be easy to forget. As Janice pointed out, there was a previous redevelopment plan draft, which the prior owner of the property did not adopt, but it gave the current owner, BDP Holdings, an opportunity not just to read what the township council and Janice and Keenan and I expected out of Lackawanna, but to listen to the hearings that were held at the planning board, read the meeting minutes, learn from that. They also made a very wise decision in hiring 2 firms to assist them, 2 internationally recognized firms, to interpret what they were hearing. And so in a lot of ways, the project, in my view, is achieving a very high standard in meeting our expectations for that plan. I know with the diagrams you've seen, it's been very hard to tell for yourselves, like, what are we getting? What's the character of this place? So that's what I'm hoping to do for you this evening. The agenda is to walk you through tonight's images, and to do it in a couple of ways. High level, some views will be a little bit more abstract, but the bulk of them will be ground level views. You can experience as close as possible what this project might look and feel like. You'll notice this disclaimer: prepared in collaboration with Montclair Township based on the 2017 draft of the Lackawanna Plaza redevelopment plan. It's really more, it's not just a disclaimer. It's meant to remind us that what we're about to see is the product of a lot of people saying what they don't want, but also what they do want. And this project, I see it as a kind of natural evolution of those conversations. So with that said, we'll talk about the site for a second. The site is very unusual. It's very unusual for our town center. When people think of the town center, they think of a Main Street kind of appearance. We've got a very elegant collection of eclectic buildings from different periods, and they're 10 to 15 feet away from the curb, and they've got interesting storefronts and facades and parapets. Lackawanna Plaza is not like that. It's important to know that. There's certain architectural facts that we kind of understand, but maybe haven't put words to. Forgive me if some of you are like already there, but I wanted to make sure we're all reading from the same Bible, if you will. This is a very difficult site to develop, because if we actually just use the DNA of Main Street, we would end up doing harm to a lot of important pieces of this site, not the least of which is the historic waiting station, what's left of the steel stanchions. We also have a cresting road, Grove Street, which climbs up and down as you travel from south to north. It would be inappropriate to just line the street with a traditional street wall. And then, of course, on the north edge with Glen Ridge, things change from a kind of commercial context to something that's quasi-commercial. We've got some institutions with the post office and the funeral home. There's a multifamily building next to a single family, and so on. So these are really challenging conditions. And when you see the diagram that Janice talked about, that's not the product of some cookie cutter idea of what a generally good setback is from a street, or what a good effective step back is. Everything I'm about to show you is very much kind of strategic and surgical in how the massing has been adjusted to help make sense of this site and achieve all of those objectives and goals that Janice talked about. So I've had the benefit of being able to work with BDP and their firms as we continue to look at the project. I'm showing you now what I consider a very difficult drawing because I figured let me get this out of the way. We call this, there's a technical term for this, it's not very experiential. It's very mechanical. It's called an axonometric drawing. You can actually take a ruler or scale and measure things off of it. But it's a useful tool in architecture to begin to talk about a project from a higher level. You're looking at buildings A, B, C, D, and E. Now, one way you can use this drawing is just kind of orient yourself and say, okay, I get a sense of relative mass or height from one building to the next. If you look a little bit more closely, this drawing reveals what I call the conceptual diagram for the massing. This is a scheme that is intended to really strike a balance between where the masses are and where the public open spaces are, so that they counterbalance each other. It's not what you often see where you get a building and a plaza or an open space is an afterthought. So you end up with what I would describe as outdoor rooms. And in the plan, the same drawings you've seen underlie this drawing. There's something called the main plaza here facing Bloomfield Avenue. Station Plaza here, right next to Grove Street, and then the Linear Park. But because of the nature of this drawing, you're not seeing most of Linear Park. Thankfully, I brought additional drawings, and we're going to put you in Linear Park today. Another good way to use this drawing is to take a look at buildings D and E as they relate to the Montclair Mews, which I understand might be a little faint. It's in the bottom right corner for you to see. I heard it mentioned that there'll be a 7-story structure along Montclair Mews, which is really not the case. The way the setbacks and stepbacks are written, parts of the building can climb up to 6 stories. There's no 7th story anywhere on this site. They can climb up to 6 stories, but they have to start out much lower. And so you can see how this form, there's actually 4 stories, there's a setback, you have a 5th story and another setback, and that's the 6th story there. It then continues to step back or down really to the north. And the Montclair Mews, in fact, for those of you who might live there or know it, it doesn't stretch beyond this point to the north. It becomes a parking lot after this point to the north. So the structure that most of us see from Bloomfield Avenue is really about that long. Other things that I'd like to point out, which a drawing like this, again, unless you really examined it, and it's going to be posted online, so you'll have an opportunity to do that, I'm sure. It's showing you arcades, these and storefronts. These begin to give you a sense of the detail and approachability of the project. And in fact, I think it's very helpful the way this design team on both sides of Grove Street are using that arcade. It's a traditional kind of storefront rhythm. In the case on the west side of building E, so we don't see it, and on the south side and the east side of building C, we've got these arcades. Arcades are very traditional architectural form and a way of making a building more engaging. You're going to see this again in 3D, but I just wanted to point that out to you. We don't see Glenridge Avenue and how the building steps down. Not yet, anyway. And I'm going to go to the next image. So how are these decisions about stepbacks and setbacks made? These designers very skillfully use something called a sky exposure plane, which is used to take a line of sight from a specific place on a sidewalk or street in order to determine where the phenomenon of foreshortening makes it so that a building that might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories tall will primarily appear to be 4 stories. This is the same phenomenon we took advantage of at Seymour Street. So on this plan drawing, which is, I don't know if there's a drawing quite as stripped of all the other graphics in the redevelopment plan that's been issued. This has a lot of detail you may not have seen before. We have 3 red lines. This shows where we've been studying this effect, the sky exposure plane as it relates to the new buildings and the buildings across the street. There's several diagrams. I just have 2 sheets of them here for you, where this project has been studied to understand how do you sort of gradient the project so that it melts back into its context. For example, this is Glen Ridge Avenue. This is a cut line for it, cut line D, and it's telling us what we would see if we cut through both sides of the street. That's the existing building height. This particular building along Glen Ridge, which you couldn't see in the prior drawing, it has a tall base for retail. It steps back 15 feet. So this is the first 4 stories. So at the 4th story, it steps back again 10 feet. At the 5th story, it steps back 20 feet to really limit visibility of that 6th story. So you hear 6 stories, that's so high. In fact, as you saw in the prior 3D axonometric and these drawings, in very few places do these buildings actually achieve that maximum height. Site circulation. I realize I'm teasing all of you because it's like, well, where are the ground level views? But I have to do this in order to help you understand how the spaces will be experienced, because when we experience things in real life, it happens in time. We're walking through spaces. So I need to have sort of create a global image of what this place will be like. The site is designed to be very porous, pedestrian friendly, from north to south, east to west. All these light blue lines represent pedestrian paths, projected pedestrian paths, sidewalks, hardscapes, places that you can just amble through. But as I mentioned, there are really 3 distinct outdoor rooms or spaces that are park-like in nature: the main plaza, the station plaza, and linear park. All right, I'll start here with the first ground level view. This image is taken actually from the redevelopment plan, but in the redevelopment plan, it's just a photo of the existing conditions. We've asked the redeveloper here, just as we did in Seymour Street, to fill in a number of images taken in advance so that we can cut down on shenanigans and make sure that what we see is what we get. There are 10 total photo collages we've asked for. 4 of the 10, actually 5 of the 10 really focus on how the historic assets will appear in the context of the new construction. So in this view, we're standing at the corner of, technically we're at the corner of Bloomfield and Elm, looking toward Grove. This is Grove. That's building E and that's building C. I mentioned the arcade-like conditions that are intended to make the buildings feel approachable and a place you'd want to engage with, do business with, walk near. And of course, we've got the waiting room visibility here, and that's a product of building C being pushed well back from the corner. The setback is quite dramatic there. This has been a point of concern for everyone, including me. At what point do we start to sacrifice the presence of the waiting room for the sake of development? In this case, I think the image very effectively demonstrates that the waiting room is still highly visible coming from the east toward the west. It could be more visible.
You're on the other side of the road. You're not on the coming up.
Well, what was the question? We are on the east side of Grove, looking northwest. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, yeah. No, that's fine. Happy to answer questions afterward. Maybe we can return to specific imagery and get into them that way. All right. We're going to take a step back now to talk about the outdoor spaces, because the buildings are there to form the spaces beside them and vice versa. So in this case, I want you to notice something. This is the waiting room, and that's building C. The footprints are not that different. The image I just showed you, you might conclude building C was really big, but in fact, I want to assure you that building C actually isn't that large. What the design team is after, what the proposed redevelopment plan is after, is creating a well-balanced outdoor room that gives the waiting room a heightened purpose by helping define an outdoor space. It's not parking, although it includes a roadway around it for short-term parking, but this is not a conventional plaza. I would actually describe it as more of a piazza, which, for those of you who've had the good fortune to travel may have been in shared spaces where you've got primarily a hardscape that's used by people and maybe sometimes vehicles, or exclusively people for festivals and events. And in fact, the redeveloper has already defined a number of different uses for this space that they would like to see. Day-to-day use with a sort of centralized presence of a park, a food festival, in which case the roadway would be closed down, similar to the way we will close Church Street, or sometimes South Park. So cars don't enter and you get the benefit from building face to building face of an outdoor room. Music festival, you can either have that on the main space or spread the seating around to both sides for picnic-like conditions. Winter holiday, they're showing a rink. How does the space really work? Does it exist? I have not been to Wales. I'd love to go to Wales. This is Caernarfon. I just like saying that. I found this space because it's very characteristic of a European-style piazza where you actually have primarily hardscape, and by using stripes, changing the pavement design, you can articulate cartways where vehicles are allowed to go, to drive, to park, to deliver goods, load and unload. It can become a very effective shared space. Obviously, there are concerns about safety, which are often addressed through the introduction of bollards or other means. These are details to be determined during the site plan review, but the potential for it is in the redevelopment plan and in the images I'm sharing with you. This is the Knoxville Market Square. Similar kind of history, historic town center, awkward space, very wide street, not sure how to use it. They didn't entirely retire cars from entering the space because cars, trucks do have a purpose when it comes to servicing businesses. It so happens that the width of this is actually less than the width of the piazza or main plaza that we're talking about tonight. So I'm going to show you one that's a little bit closer in size. It's bigger. I'll tell you how much bigger in a second, but this is Market Square in Pittsburgh. It also has that attribute of being ringed by a road, again, for serviceability, but the space can also be closed off for special events and things like we've already talked about. In terms of size, because this came up recently, the plaza that's in the redevelopment plan now is approximately 170 feet by 240 feet. This one on screen is 250 feet by 270. So what we're talking about is a space that's about 2/3 the size of this. It's not small by any means. Okay, now we're going down. We're going down into the project now. My last sort of aerial view, I think. We are now closer to the waiting room. Representation, another big term in architecture, can be deceptive. The intention is not to have strong breaks or curbs, which you may see these dark lines and think that's what's going on here. That's not the intention, at least as far as I'm concerned, and I think the redeveloper is aware of that. And even the nature of these drawings is still quite conceptual. We're talking about there will be some greenery, but primarily it's a kind of hardscape that can serve a lot of different functions. This dovetails into some sustainability issues as well. The redeveloper, based on the diagrams and analyses I've seen, is fully intending to detain all stormwater on site. It so happens that under this area will be one of the larger reservoirs for controlling that flow. So having a hardscape helps control and manage that rather than a large soggy lawn. So this gives you a sense of what that space might look like with the waiting room, the supermarket at the head of this plaza, and now we're going to walk to this point right here between buildings A and C. We're going to walk towards Station Plaza. Building A on the left, this is the corner of the supermarket. We're now seeing part of Building B in the distance. The stanchions are going to be, we're expecting, planning, hoping the stanchions will be adaptively reused to create shading devices for Station Plaza. Some of you, maybe all of you, have heard about the rail car that's being restored, and so that's what we see here in the foreground. in the distance, part of Building D on the east side of Grove Street. So there is this connectivity, a kind of vitality of movement, which is supported by the historic elements that become a kind of constant presence and theme, no matter which outdoor space you happen to be in. Where could we be? I mean, I love this view. My favorite view, recently created for this presentation actually, we're on Grove Street. And for the first time in decades, we have a clear view of what this would have looked like for commuters back in the day. There's part of one of the remaining existing stairs. You used to be able to get off your train on the platform and walk east toward Grove. There were two giant stairs that took you up to Grove Street. You could walk up to Grove. The redevelopment plan talks about this. The redevelopment team is very interested in rehabilitating that stair, modifying it in order to make that connection back down to the plaza or the level of the waiting room station. But obviously it's a huge asset if you're walking from the north and want to go to the supermarket as well. So we're also overlooking the historic balustrade, which remains on the west side of Grove, and we can see Station Plaza here with the wings of those steel stanchions from the old platforms. Parking is located in places where it's primarily hidden from view. We've got parking in a couple of stories of Building A above the supermarket. This parking hidden within Building B. On the east side, the parking is at the lowest levels, similar to Seymour Street, where you really wouldn't see it at all. So there are three parking areas. We're going to go a little bit to the north now. We're walking north on Grove. Our view is slightly elevated here, but we're looking back down into Station Plaza. There's the rail car for orientation. We were previously walking through that opening between buildings A and C over there. Just one conception, a placekeeper for art below that green wall. These are things TBD, but the redeveloper is very committed to supporting the arts, and there'll be something special along that edge. Not seen in this view is the restored, well, it's partly seen here actually, the restored water fountain that was the horse trough. So that provides a real focal point when you're in Station Plaza, visual, oral, in terms of sound as well. But the fun doesn't end. No, the fun doesn't end. I have one more image. This part of Station Plaza continues under Grove Street. What we now know, well, for those of you who've experienced walking into the Pathmark from the east side, there's the big dome. You walk through some doors, and then there's like a hall, and then you're under the platform sheds. So Grove Street remains, but the roof on the west side is taken away. So we now walk under here to the east side. We would emerge right here. The berm has been carved away, much simplified, much more daylight coming into that underpass from both sides, much greater awareness of Grove as, I mean, it's really a wonderful thing. This town's topography is special and defining in the way we, I think, understand it, inhabit it, travel through it. It will be wonderful to see Grove, again, as a bridge-like feature was what it used to be with the tracks running under it. And then we have a partial view of the linear park, which Janice had mentioned, and it shows up in the diagram. We're looking at the base of Building D here, which continues toward us on the right side. There'll be a range of ways of circulating through the site, all ADA accessible, fully universal design, with also a range of places to sit, rest, relax, have your midday lunch, or in the case of all the way to the north with the retailer, I understand the redeveloper's hoping to bring a food business there with outdoor dining, helping reconnect commercial along Glen Ridge. I didn't mention it, but Building B, which faces the post office, and the funeral home also is slated for retail on its base. Again, trying to stretch that Glen Ridge Avenue commercial corridor, make it more active, make it safer, busier, and so on. And that concludes this part of the presentation. Thank you. So I know there was at least one comment / question as I was going through the imagery. I'd be happy to field comments from the crowd. It's literally standing room only. I didn't quite expect that. So I know we have a lot of people here. 2 hands went up real quick. You first, sir.
All right, so my name is Daniel Cruz.
Do we have a portable? Oh, I think we have a portable microphone coming out. Okay, you might have to travel to the mic. So
My name is Daniel Cruz. I was calling through the Land Redevelopment Plan Agreement, and I guess my question was, what are going to be some of the checks and balances if this gets approved as is? And what I mean by that is there's a line on the bottom of page 14 that says if this gets approved, that it supersedes all current zoning ordinance, as well as there's some language in there that suggests density bonuses as a way to compensate for an increase in height. Now, I know normally in these processes there's an economic model analysis that gets done with like cost benefit, so I understand there has to be a certain amount of like units for it to make sense, but what are the assurances to the people that, you know, essentially the plan is going to go as it says?
I'm not the best person to answer that, so I'm going to pass the microphone, but I can tell you that architecturally the bar is very high, and while these images may not be exactly what's built, if it's not, the expectation is that the character, quality, and care we've taken with the building forms, masses, balance of building versus public space will still be there. For checks and balances, Janice, I think, is the right person, so I'll turn this over to her.
There is a little bit of leeway, because certainly the details are worked out at site plan, but there are certain absolute requirements in a redevelopment plan that you would not have under zoning. Those absolute requirements include the supermarket. We will get a supermarket. That absolute requirement is affordable housing. We'll get that. We will get the parks. We're requiring this amount of open space. We detail the amount of open space. In terms of the building design, that's why we went through this process. I mean, we can't design the buildings in the redevelopment, but we can design the regulations to get the buildings. So that's essentially what the redevelopment will assure, and that's why we have 114 pages with a lot of shalls and requirements.
Oh yeah, this gentleman.
Maybe get a line? Can we get people, since everybody has to speak at the microphone, if we can just get a line of people who want to comment or ask questions? I think that'll be most efficient.
Oh, good. Okay.
My name is Dan Hoberman. We live at 10 Warren Place. It seems like the redevelopment group has done a lot of work, time, energy on the redevelopment. My concern is what specifically is going to be done with regard to the traffic flow between the north end and the south end. We can sit for 2 or 3 lights right now on the corner of Elm and Grove, just picking up children from school, and that's the same all the way up the line. Doesn't matter which street you try and cross on. So I'm greatly concerned. I don't know the density. I don't know the total number of people who are going to live here, nor the people who might go shopping there, but not just on this corner, but all the way up every single crossing until you reach north and south. So I'm wondering what type of domino effect it might have, and what specific studies are going to be done.
That's an excellent question. And I understand the issue, having experienced it myself. I know that there's been some changes as well on Grove Street with the new lighting on Bloomfield Avenue. So in terms of this redevelopment plan, we did have it reviewed by the township's traffic engineer, who made some recommendations. The redevelopment plan was based, or the developer did a traffic study in March of 2022. So we have traffic numbers from that time, looked at them, and it didn't seem to change the level of service at these different intersections in March of 2022. When they come in for site plan, they would be required to do a new traffic study with new traffic counts. And in fact, our traffic engineer has recommended that we revise the plan to state that, or include a requirement that if there's any change in level of service as a result of this project through the new traffic study that we submitted, that the developer would have to come up with a plan and finance those changes, pay their fair share of those changes to the intersections.
Is there any mechanism for the redevelopment people to have some minimum requirements? I mean, as you know, and I think everybody who goes south to north or north to south knows, it's become a major problem. I mean, it's almost impossible to cross at any intersection without waiting for 2 or 3 lights and more sometimes. So it can back up for a quarter mile or a half a mile, south, north, north, south. It doesn't matter. Almost any street, except maybe Willow and 1 or 2 more. So my question is, can redevelopment mandate some minimum traffic requirements, just like they've mandated minimum open space?
I think what we can mandate is that there's no degradation, and that's what in terms of the operation of the intersections and the roadways that surround this property.
I have 2 actually small questions, but they may be related. First is, for the grocery store, where will deliveries take place? And a perhaps related question, it looks like there's no pedestrian access between Station Plaza and Crane Park. It looks like there's kind of like a wall. So I'm wondering, is there any way that there can be to increase the traffic flow through there? And those may be related, so.
So the first question, actually, I'll deal with the second question first. So the expectation is that because the redeveloper doesn't own this parcel, this corner parcel in the northwest, if you're in Station Plaza, you're probably walking into the main plaza and along this edge. I'm not 100% sure if it's been worked out. I haven't asked. Whether the public access along that row of steel stanchions continues behind the waiting room and emerges on Lackawanna Plaza. That's Crane Park, of course. Or whether you walk around. So I can't give you 100%, but I'm glad you made it top of mind. The first question again?
Where the deliveries
Oh, yeah. So deliveries are, it's a longer answer that really requires a plan drawing view, which I didn't bring, so I didn't want to dwell on that kind of diagram. It's intended to be located slightly to the west of where it is now, along the west edge of Building B. And then it continues underneath Building B. So loading right now, which is all open air, and if you guys have been around long enough, you know on Glen Ridge, sometimes you'd see 2 or 3 of those large trucks kind of in their loading dock. That will be undercover now under Building B.
I'm not sure what to call this issue architecturally, but I'll call it the Amazon Prime Uber Eats issue. I live 1 long block from the main entrance to 2 South Willow, and I pass by 2 South Willow a lot. And you mentioned in your introduction the lessons learned from the Seymour Street Plaza development. One failing, I went to several of the public hearings on that, and I never saw one weakness that persists and will never go away, and that's at that main entrance, there's not room for even 1 car to drop off a resident or to pick up a resident. And I have literally never, I frequently drive from my driveway out to Bloomfield Avenue, passing that building, and I have never seen at less than 2 vehicles parked where they shouldn't be, either across the street, dropping somebody off, or blocking one of the 3 lanes that, it expands from 2 lanes to 3 right at the end. And one of them is almost always blocked because there's no real drop-off area for that building. Do these buildings have something like that in this modern age where the companies might go away, but I think Amazon Prime and Uber Eats or something like them is going to keep existing? And where can deliveries like that be made without stopping the flow?
So I've got most of the answer I need to make you happy, I think. Number one, if you are specifically going to the supermarket, you would take advantage of this short-term roadway or cartway, we call it. It's really not even meant for parking, as I mentioned, 15 minutes max, but you would be brought off of Bloomfield Avenue, dropped off, and then leave. You could also enter the parking deck by going along Lackawanna Plaza and parking your vehicle in the building.
What if I had a friend who lived in Building C and I was dropping her off?
Oh, Building C is actually slated more for commercial on the ground floor and perhaps office space above. Residential would be Building B, Buildings D and E, and this is a bit of a placekeeper, but you can see there's actually a kind of boomerang shape. I don't know how you would describe it. This is shown right now as parking, but there has been discussion about converting that to a pull-off outside the Grove Street traffic so that people could do exactly what you're talking about, pull off Grove and queue and drop off right here. The lobbies for D&E, there are a few different entry points for the residents, but a main entry point is right here.
I would recommend that concept.
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you're emphasizing that. Yes.
It's a big problem with Seymour Street.
Hi, thank you. In general, I'm in favor of this development. I think there's a huge housing crisis in the country and in the state, and the only way out of it is to build. And I think there's been obviously a lot of thought to community concerns in this development. I really like the idea of the top setbacks at the top of the building. We have other buildings in town that are 6 stories and people never think about them. But yeah, the senior citizen housing behind Grove Pharmacy is 6 stories, but they did a beautiful job with setbacks and with courtyard entrance. And one of the things that, looking at your renderings, and I know they're not final architectural drawings, is you still have the block, even though they're only 4-story at the very street side, they look like warehouses on your your sketch. They look, it feels like I'm driving into Hoboken on Observer Highway with all the old warehouse buildings. And I would really like to see some beautiful architecture in Montclair, which we pretty much don't have. So that's number one. And in fact, you look at the old waiting area, and there's that roof, that dramatic roof line. You know, that should be echoed somewhere in this building to relate these buildings to that existing architectural historical building, in my opinion. The second thing is, plazas are painted green, but I see on your renderings that they're really going to be stone or colored cement or something and have, some trees. And one of the things I really do not like about the Seymour Street development is it's very cold. It's cement, seating areas. There's really nothing very humane in that development. It's hot in the summer, it's cold in the winter. And I would like, the horse trough sounds nice, but maybe waterfall, fountain, real plantings that are there all the time to soften that whole scape. So, thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Oh, yeah, no, thank you for your comments. I just have to, I want to acknowledge, yeah, just quickly, the validity of what style do you choose. I think that when you look at the redevelopment plan, it offers a possible range, but insists on high quality, whether it is more historical or more modern. What we're seeing here are primarily placekeepers, not the final design. And noted on greenscape, hardscape, making spaces inviting.
Hi, I'd like to talk a little bit about your main plaza. Looks like, I'm trying to visualize the actual location. It looks like Building C is going to take up half of what the existing parking lot is, which leaves half of that parking lot, which is less, I think, as wide as this room. And you have a street going through that. So there's really very little public space there. And, it looks like that's the only vehicular access to Building C, so how would you close that off for events if that's your only access?
Got it. So, great question. Great question. I think it's important to remember this phenomenon I'm talking about, where if you're only focusing on where the cars aren't supposed to go, the overall space does seem less. But for special events, I think the entire space from building face to building face will read larger. I'm confident at 100, yeah, the east-west, the main plaza is 170 feet. I would estimate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This space is about 40 feet wide. I just told you 170 feet from building face to building face, so that's a lot different. I hear you. I'm telling you the truth. What was your second? Deliveries to Building C. I think the idea is that it's most likely the roadway would be closed off for larger public events, and since Building C is meant to be primarily commercial with office space above, that the need to get in and out wouldn't be as urgent as like maybe residential drop-off. But it's true. There are questions about delivery and loading for Building C because it's freestanding, which is really an unusual condition in any town center. And you have to make decisions about, is it one face that gets the loading, or do you make it two faces are possible, perhaps from Grove?
Well, as the previous speaker said, you're going to have Uber and you're going to have Amazon and UPS trucks and everything. Your picture shows no cars. That's not what's going to happen. So.
Thank you.
No, man, we have cars. We have cars. Not trying to hide the cars.
And also, I would make the plea that 20% affordable housing is insufficient. I know it's, the requirement. We've had other developments that were approved with fewer than 20% affordable housing. And in this town, I know my son can't live here on his salary. There are other people, who make lower salaries that should be able to live here. And I would like to see 40% or something higher than that. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. How are you? I'm James Cotter. I'm a member of the Clover Hill Place Grove Terrace Neighborhood Association. A number of my neighbors are here in the audience tonight. We're going to be directly in the shadow of this development, and we have grave concerns about traffic, about circulation, about pedestrian safety. So I'm here not really to address you, Ira, but more the council members that are with us. Our neighborhood association is calling for an independent traffic study, something similar to what Dan had mentioned earlier at the top of comments, but a traffic study that is independent of the developer and also independent of the township. What we're looking for is fresh eyes, an objective measure, thanks, an objective measure of rationally what will occur as a consequence of this development. I would like that traffic study to be funded by the township, clearly. I would like that traffic study to take into account the radius of development that has occurred, not only from 2017 when the previous traffic study was done, but also that future casts how developments that are coming online in the next 5, 10, 15 years are going to impact pedestrian safety, circulation, and traffic. This traffic study would need to happen soon, before the horses leave the barn, meaning a traffic study that's independent of the developer and the township won't be sufficient next year. Like, we would like action on this before the end of the year to make sure that, one, it is occurring at the same time that this plan goes to the planning board, comes back to the council. It'll be absolutely crucial for quality of life and the lived experience of those who are actually going to suffer the consequences of whatever development occurs. Sean, Lori, Peter, I'm going to ask for your support on this at the council level, and I'm really looking for your advocacy and your protection for the residents who are going to be impacted. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Charlie, and is Pineapple still gonna be there?
I certainly hope so, but that's not our call. It's certainly, they certainly have the opportunity to stay there, and I'm sure the owner would like to keep them there as well.
Also, will like the view from it, will it like only see the buildings? Cause I know like the buildings are like near it.
The view from Pineapples looking out towards Bloomfield Avenue and Lackawanna Plaza will not change. In fact, it'll be incorporated into the big main plaza that's proposed. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for a great presentation. I've been watching this development for quite some time, as you know, and worked with you on the Seymour Street property. So I am happy that Ira Smith is actively involved in this project. He's an asset to our community as a person who can guide and vet these projects, but he does need our help. But I do have some specific questions that are of great concern. I'd like to ask Janice, what is the total number of parking spaces required if this was a standard zoning application? And what is the number of parking spaces proposed in the current plan? And what is the difference between the requirement by zoning and what is presented presently in the plan?
Well, I don't have that information because this is not a site plan. We don't know the square footage of these buildings. We have the parking requirements. And the parking requirements in this plan are the same as the parking requirements in the Seymour Street plan.
But that was also an area of redevelopment. What I'm asking is, presumably, we know the total square footage of the project. We pretty much know the split between commercial and residential. So we should be able to have a range, a pretty close estimation of the total number of parking spaces.
I don't have this is David. This is not a site plan. I have a minimum requirement for the number of retail space and office space, and I have the maximum number of residential units. But we don't have. It's not a site plan. I can't tell you that this building is going to be X square feet. These are conceptual. The information that you want, we would have when they come in with the site plan, and we have the actual square footage of the different buildings and the different uses. But bear in mind, you're asking for what's key is the required parking, and what we have in this plan is the same parking requirement that we had for Seymour Street.
Well, again, just to clarify for those people who don't understand, there's zoning requirements, a certain number of parking spaces either per occupant or per 1,000 square feet of whether it's residential or commercial space, office, et cetera, or medical even is different. So there is a standard that we would apply if it was a zoning issue, regular zoning application. And Janice, you brought up the concept of a shared parking arrangement. Well, the premise of a shared parking arrangement, if I understand correctly, is residents who leave during the day, by vacating the parking spaces, those spaces become available to people who are parking as commercial tenants during the day. Is that correct? I've always had a problem with the concept of shared parking at this location. And I'll tell you why. People who choose to live here, there's a high likelihood they're choosing to live here because of their close proximity to the train station. So these people, if they are in fact living here because they are commuters and wish to avail themselves of the close proximity to the train station, will not be taking their cars out during the day. That was, in the previous application, that was an issue. Since that time, more and more people are working from home, which means the concept of a shared parking arrangement, as it has been sold to us, really has become less and less realistic. And I don't know about everybody here, but I think parking has become a very challenging issue in this town. So I think that we all have to be cognizant of this shared parking arrangement. And I think when we do get a site plan, we need to take a very close look. Everybody here should take a very close look as to what would be required if it wasn't an area of redevelopment, and understand if that variance between what is actually required in the plan and would be required by zoning is realistic, and to what extent will that impinge on quality of life for residents in town.
Thank you, David. How many other people here have questions or comments? One, two, just two? Because I'm trying to make sure everybody has an opportunity. Okay, good.
All right, so I would just ask me too. Be careful there. So everyone who's online, will work to answer these. We did say we'd end at 9, so I'm mindful of everyone's 10 minutes. So if you have multiple questions, we'd ask your one and go back if there's a chance. But everyone here will get to. We've got 10 minutes, so let's try and go through. So I would ask to try and keep your questions to your questions and get your answers. And again, anything could be sent in. But mindful of where we started, exactly where we'd say we'd end, and we want to make sure that everyone gets a chance who's online here. Thank you.
Where is the financial feasibility cost-benefit analysis for the residents of Montclair? Where is that, and when is that going to be presented to the residents to understand the economic impact?
David, I have a quick response for that. The developer is required to submit a fiscal impact statement, and that fiscal impact statement will look at the economic impacts, the social impacts, and all the other impacts to Montclair residents. It's a site plan requirement. Yes.
I would like to recommend next time you have something like this, you start it on time and you make sure people can find it easily. It's a really good way to respect the people who came out tonight. But what I'd like to know is, will there be access from the parking garage that seems somewhat underground to the supermarket? Also, how wide will these sidewalks be? I think one of the biggest problems people have with the newer buildings in town are that they are much, much too narrow to create that sort of community feeling.
Got it. Oh, quick answer to each. Parking for the supermarket, dedicated parking is above the supermarket, which it's out there. Not all of us have encountered it. It has integrated into it extra wide escalators that let you go up and down with your carts. And sidewalks are very generous. Building E facing Bloomfield Avenue, for example, is 22 feet deep sidewalk. And there's a similar generosity throughout the project in excess of what we typically see.
Actually, all the buildings have right now, our C1 zone has a 0 front yard setback, which is what you see with many of our existing buildings on Bloomfield Avenue. There's no 0 front yard setback on any of these buildings. It's at least, I believe, 10 feet. So they're going to be wider, at least double what they are right now.
Thanks.
Being truthful in public presentations is mandatory for residents to have faith in their government. Our planning board has recommended 4 stories maximum for our downtown areas going forward, recognizing the quality of life needs and master plan impacts that development has had. Our zoning code for this area is 6 stories at 67 feet. The large buildings here are listed at 87 feet, plus another 107 feet, which begins to approach the height of the hotel. Aren't we being a bit disingenuous by calling this 6 stories instead of the actual height that it is? And shouldn't we, if that is the case, recognize the planning board's decision to reduce heights in our downtown to keep the feel and quality of life that the township has called for?
So the standing zoning is 6 stories, and the master plan recognizes that in redevelopment it can be beneficial to adhere to that if other benefits are provided, which I believe this plan does. The speaker is referring to an additional 20 feet on top of the height here. I think he's referring to mechanical equipment, But that's true throughout the town center. The so-called extra 20 feet is available to any developer in and out of a redevelopment or development site. So talking about truth, 10, I don't think, if there's 20 in the redevelopment plan, that's a mistake, and I would like you to point it out to us after the meeting. But that, I think, is, to use your word, I don't want to say you're being disingenuous, but I believe it would be very unlikely to be 20 feet in the redevelopment plan. It's probably the standard mechanical allowance, since buildings today do require rooftop equipment. We didn't talk about the other issue with the site being bowl-shaped, meaning it's lower in the center where Station Plaza is, and that's the one place where the buildings are at their highest. But again, not from the first floor all the way up. The greatest height is only achieved toward the very center of these buildings due to the step backs. I'll follow up with you on that 20 feet, sir.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ira SMITH. I live 2 short blocks away from this project. And 7 years later, it's really very disillusioning to feel like we still have not been heard about many of the concerns that we have raised about the quality of life for the people who live in the shadow of this project. We're still talking about density. We're still talking about green space that isn't actually green. We're still talking about changes to the traffic patterns that affect the people who live right next door. And I really don't understand how we come to these meetings time and time again. There's a dribble more information. It's like the drip coffee pot. You don't know quite how long it's going to take you to get that cup of coffee, but you still stand there looking at it, hoping that it fills in the time that you have. We still don't have an actual site plan. Will we even see one before this project is approved? Before building starts, we'll wake up some morning and there'll be trucks rolling in, and the project will have been approved, and we will know nothing about it, and it'll be nothing that we've seen or talked about. I'd like to address Mayor Spiller directly. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I do not recall seeing you at the 4th Ward meeting that addressed a project that is being built in the 4th Ward. Here we are at a 3rd Ward meeting, and you are facilitating the discussion. I don't feel represented, I don't feel heard, and I don't feel like you have my best interests at heart or the interests of my neighbors or my community. The public benefit that you talk about does not feel like it's for the people who live next door to me.
Hello, Kathleen Bennett. I'm a member of the Historic Preservation Commission. To be fair, the HPC has not reviewed this project yet. We were supposed to review it last month, and we were asked to delay it because there would be more visual aids, which I was hoping was going to be a model, but I guess we don't have a 3D model. Okay. However, having said that we didn't review it yet, I read on page 36 of the plan that the planning department has learned the input of the Historic Preservation Commission and other planning and architectural historians and experts during the course of the recent planning board consideration of the site plan. And so I'm assuming that you have looked at what the HPC was concerned about in the last reiteration of the plan. And I believe there were 8 historic elements. Ira, you mentioned the horse trough tonight. What you didn't show in these very beautiful renderings is the Lackawanna Plaza by Lackawanna Park, which has a beautiful overhang, and it's the head of the train shed. So I'd like to know what's going on there. And then I have another question. You also said the stanchions, which are going to be repurposed, are going to be used as a shade item in the, I don't know, whatever, the station park. However, on the rendering, you have wires going through. So I don't understand where the shade is.
So on the east side, the head shed, if you will, is being preserved. It's going to be remaining in place. It's not being altered except to remove the non-historic components from the 1980s, those sort of glass bays in between the steel columns. So that's mostly untouched and preserved in place. What you're seeing in these renders is, again, sort of a placekeeper. The question was how many of the concrete wings are viable, and once we remove the skylight elements from the 80s are removed, will the concrete be able to support itself or not? What condition are they in? Prior reports said they were in poor condition, would need to be replaced. The idea is to make Station Plaza inviting so that it has shade. So although this particular image shows wires that which are intended maybe for flowering plants to grow along, or birds, it's a setup, or birds. We've also talked about maybe glazed elements, skylight-like wings, so that we recreate the form in a more modern material so that people can be protected from the elements. So it's not something that's been worked out, but it's definitely a subject of concern and interest.
All right, so just for everyone to know, we will be reviewing this at the December 15th meeting. Thank you.
Hi. I really just specifically, I hate to be the last person, but this is it. I'm just interested in the supermarket. That's really why I just came to find out, how was it really going to happen, all that. So it seems to me, so this whole project, one of the requirements, the architecture, everything, the supermarket has to be there, right? Yes. Okay, so, I don't know, like you presented like other cities that had how they present. Do you have other examples? You don't have to even answer this now, but other examples where you built based on a business, so you're assuming that that's going to be a viable business in perpetuity. I mean, I ask this because I'm from Trenton, and we had like a situation, I don't know what's going on there now, but they had a hotel built, all this, everything was built around, and the hotel went out of business. Do you understand? I'm just wondering about how that's planned in there.
Right. So I can say I'm aware that BDP Holdings has a letter of agreement with a major grocer, and what you see here is purpose designed for them, but supermarkets are kind of similar in that, the requirements in terms of ceiling height, openness, and all of that will kind of be built into the architecture. Presumably, the supermarket will be there for many, many years. I should also mention that it's my understanding that Building A, the one with the supermarket, is the one that will be built first. The developer, I believe, redeveloper understands everyone is eager to have that supermarket up and running.
Yeah, no, I know that. I'm just wondering, maybe you could provide examples on the website or whatever of other places that have built for specific businesses, whether it's a supermarket or anything else. In other words, that's what's got to be there. And if that fails, whatever. I mean, supermarkets, in my mind, actually, I can think of several supermarkets where they merge and they go out of business, they go in business, whatever. Right. We definitely need a supermarket there.
What is 40,000 square feet compared to the other supermarkets in town?
So that's actually not true. We have a table. We took the square footages for the supermarkets in town and in the area, and it will be, I think it's a little larger than Acme, or is it about the size of the Acme? It's a little larger than the Acme, for reference, in Upper Montclair. And we can post that, right? Yeah, we'll post that chart along with the other imagery from tonight. Thank you.
Let's give Ira and Janice a big round of applause. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate that. Thank you. And certainly I want to just close out by saying on behalf of Councilman Jakob Ellis and Councilwoman Price Abrams, first and foremost, because one of the questions was directed to me, this isn't a third ward meeting, and looking around, there's a lot of people not from the third ward here. But our goal, and certainly working with Councilman Cummings, we're working on all this as a team, and our effort is to make sure we're hearing from as many people as possible. And I again thank everybody who chose to come out here tonight as we continue to engage in these conversations. We asked everyone to stay engaged on this. Keep sharing your concerns, comments. Janice and Ira, they're incorporating these pieces. That's why these presentations are different and tweaked and nuanced based on the feedback. So it's a process that's working. We're really thankful for it. So I want to thank everybody for coming out, respect everyone's time. We're right where we started and ended. I want to thank everybody again, and hopefully see you guys again soon. Have a happy holidays, everyone. Thanks so much.